He has been buried 3 times. Not in the ground, but in the kind of darkness that most people never survive even once. His career was declared dead before he was 30. His 16-year-old son stopped breathing in a bathroom in the Bahamas. And the woman he built his entire second life around quietly slipped away from a disease he had already lost someone to decades before. 3 times the world took everything from him. 3 times he got back up. But here is what nobody tells you about John Travolta. The getting back up was never the impressive part. The impressive part is what he carried while doing it. This is not a story about Saturday Night Fever. This is not a story about white suits and disco balls and a generation that worshipped a 23-year-old kid from New Jersey. This is a story about what happens to a man after the music stops, after the applause fades, after the cameras move on, and the phone calls dry up, and the people he loved the most stop being there when he reaches for them. This is a story about what survival actually costs, and whether anyone, no matter how famous, no matter how talented, no matter how rich, can ever truly outrun the weight of loss. John Travolta grew up in a house where money was not just scarce, it was almost fictional. His father, Salvatore, had once been a semi-professional football player, the kind of man who had known what it felt like to be watched and admired. By the time John came along, the youngest of 6 children, his father was selling tires, coming home each night with black-stained hands and a silence that filled every room. His mother, Helen, had sung on radio programs, her voice traveling into living rooms across America during a time when the radio was the closest thing ordinary people had to magic. She had given all of that up for a high school drama classroom, teaching teenagers who mostly did not want to be there, trying to pass something on to kids who could not yet understand what she was offering them. What Helen did give perfectly, though, was to her youngest son. She saw something in John that their cramped house and empty bank account could not contain. She told him that talent was the great equalizer, that the stage did not care about your address or your father's paycheck. She told him something that lodged itself so deep in his chest that it would drive every decision he made for the next 50 years. Being poor is temporary, she said. Being ordinary is forever. When John was 16, he walked out of Dwight Morrow High School in the middle of his junior year and never went back. Most parents would have collapsed in fear. His parents told him to go. His mother looked at him and said something that became the engine of everything that followed. If this is what you want, then you give it everything. No backup plan. No safety net. You either make it or you become a cautionary tale. Those words were not comfort. They were a dare. And John Travolta has never in his life been able to walk away from a dare. He crossed the Hudson River into New York City with barely enough money for a week. He slept on floors that smelled like mildew and disappointment. He auditioned for everything, anything, swallowing rejection after rejection the way you swallow bad medicine, because you know that stopping means the disease wins. He landed a touring production of Grease, not as Danny, the lead, the role the audience falls in love with, but as Duty, a supporting character the audience mostly forgets. He made his Broadway debut in a show called Over Here that closed quickly and left almost no trace in theater history. He distributed flyers on frozen New York streets where the wind cut through his jacket like it had a personal grievance against him. He carried equipment for productions that paid almost nothing. He sang for audiences who looked past him like he was furniture. He did television commercials that aired once and vanished. But he kept moving. Not because he was fearless. Because stopping meant proving his mother wrong. And that was the one thing he could not do. Then 1975 arrived, and the world cracked open. Welcome Back Kotter premiered on television, and John Travolta, playing the lovable fool Vinnie Barbarino, became a sensation almost overnight. He was 21 years old. Girls screamed his name outside television studios. His face appeared on magazine covers in grocery stores from New York to California. He released a single that climbed into the top 10 on the Billboard charts. For the first time in his life, he could breathe without the weight of poverty pressing down on his chest. And then he met Diana. Diana Hyland was 41 years old, elegant, weathered by life in the way that certain women become more beautiful as the years accumulate rather than less. He was 22. They met on the set of a television movie called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, where she played his mother. The age gap was nearly 2 decades. The optics, as people like to say now, were complicated. None of it mattered to either of them for even a single second. "I have never been more in love with anyone in my life," Travolta would say years later with the quiet certainty of a man who had lived long enough to know exactly what he was talking about. They were, as he described it, like two maniacs who could not stop talking. After a month, it became something more. They escaped together to Palm Springs and Big Bear and New York. They chose a house where they planned to live once he finished filming his next project. The future felt infinite. Diana Hyland was dying. She had undergone a mastectomy 2 years before they met, the cancer already moving through her body with the slow and terrible patience that the disease is known for. She did not know for certain she was going to die until 2 weeks before it happened. And during those 2 weeks, while John Travolta was on a film set in New York becoming the biggest star on the planet, they spoke every evening by phone. Her voice growing fainter with each call, his desperation growing louder with each one. When her death became inevitable, he abandoned the set and flew back to Los Angeles the day before she died. They walked together in her garden. She touched flowers she would never see bloom again. He held her hand with the specific kind of grip that people use when they understand that holding cannot actually stop anything, but they hold anyway because it is the only thing left to do. They spoke of small things because the large things were too unbearable to say out loud. On March 27, 1977, Diana Hyland died in John Travolta's arms. "I felt the breath go out of her," he said years later, his voice carrying the weight of a memory that had clearly never softened with time. He was 23 years old, standing at the absolute beginning of everything the world had decided to give him. And the first person he wanted to share it with was already gone. He survived the only way he knew how. He worked. Saturday Night Fever released that same year and detonated like a cultural bomb. The image of Travolta in a white polyester suit, one arm pointed toward the ceiling, became the visual shorthand for an entire era. The Bee Gees soundtrack sold in numbers that seemed almost impossible. He earned his first Academy Award nomination. Then Grease arrived in 1978 and grossed nearly $400 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing live-action movie musical of all time. Then Urban Cowboy in 1980, and John Travolta was not just famous, he was everywhere. He was the decade. He was the feeling. But grief does not negotiate with fame. It does not care how many magazines have your face on the cover or how much your last film made on opening weekend. He buried his pain beneath choreography and sequins. He performed happiness on every screen and stage and chat show couch, while his heart continued to do what grieving hearts do regardless of who is watching. And then the fall came. The movies began failing. One after another, they failed. Critical disasters. Commercial flops. Films that opened and disappeared before anyone had time to form an opinion. And then the roles he turned down, the ones that became legendary. American Gigolo went to Richard Gere and made him a star. An Officer and a Gentleman went to Richard Gere and cemented that stardom. Splash went to Tom Hanks. Each decision had seemed reasonable at the time. Each one looked different in hindsight. By the late 1980s, John Travolta had gone from being the brightest light in Hollywood to being invisible. The phone calls from producers stopped. The scripts dried up. The man who had made the world dance was a punchline on late-night television. He was still alive, still talented, but the industry had moved on without the courtesy of even a goodbye. Then Look Who's Talking in 1989 threw him a lifeline. Not a resurrection, just enough oxygen to keep going. And then, in 1994, Quentin Tarantino called. Tarantino wanted Travolta to play Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. A heroin-addicted hitman. A character who exists in the moral gray zone that Hollywood usually pretends does not exist. Travolta hesitated for 6 months. He agonized over it. He prayed over it. Finally, he said yes. Pulp Fiction did not simply revive his career. It rewrote the entire story. His performance was a masterclass in a kind of relaxed, dangerous cool that almost nobody else could have pulled off. His dance with Uma Thurman reminded a new generation that this man had always possessed something rare and unrepeatable. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Travolta earned his second Academy Award nomination. He was back. Get shorty. Face slash off. Primary colors. For a glorious stretch of years, he commanded $20 million per film, and the world that had forgotten him was suddenly pretending it had believed in him all along. In 1991, he had married actress Kelly Preston. With Kelly, he found something he had not allowed himself to fully believe in since Diana. Not just love, but safety. A life that felt like it was being built rather than just survived. They had 3 children together. Jet, born in 1992. Ella Blue, born in 2000. Benjamin, born in 2010. Jet was diagnosed with autism and suffered from seizures. The family learned to navigate it together, the way families do when there is no alternative, with the fierce and exhausting love that does not ask for recognition. On January 2, 2009, they were vacationing in the Bahamas. Jet was 16 years old. He was found unresponsive in the bathroom. He had suffered a seizure and struck his head on the bathtub. John Travolta ran to his son and performed CPR for as long as there was any reason to believe it might make a difference. Jet was gone. The symmetry of it was the kind of thing you could not explain away or rationalize or make peace with. Diana at 41. Jet at 16. Both sudden. Both leaving him holding a hand that had gone still. Jet was the most wonderful son that 2 parents could ever ask for, John and Kelly said in their statement. We are heartbroken that our time with him was so brief. 1 year later, Benjamin was born. He brought light into a house that had gone very dark. John said Benjamin gave the home a renewed spirit. They tried to rebuild themselves around this new reason to move forward. They tried to heal from a wound that every parent who has lost a child will tell you cannot be healed, only carried differently as the years go on. On July 12, 2020, Kelly Preston died at 57 after a 2-year private battle with breast cancer. She had kept her diagnosis almost entirely out of the public eye, protecting her family in the only way she could. It is with a very heavy heart, John wrote, that I inform you that my beautiful wife Kelly has lost her battle with breast cancer. The pattern was too brutal to sit with quietly. Diana at 41 from breast cancer. Kelly at 57 from breast cancer. The same disease. The same ending. The 2 great loves of his life, taken by the same invisible enemy, decades apart. After Kelly died, his 10-year-old son Benjamin came to him with the kind of honesty that only children are brave enough to speak out loud. Because Mom passed away, Benjamin said, I am afraid you are going to die too. John Travolta did not lie to his son. He did not offer false comfort or easy reassurance. He said, Ben, I could die tomorrow. You could. Anybody can. It is part of life. You just do your best at trying to live the longest you can. That sentence, spoken by a 70-year-old man to his frightened 10-year-old, is perhaps the truest and most quietly devastating thing John Travolta has ever said. He is 70 now. He lives at his estate in Ocala, Florida, where his house sits beside a private runway. He owns multiple aircraft. His net worth stands at $250 million. He supports the Jet Travolta Foundation, helping families who are navigating autism and seizure disorders. He raises Ella and Benjamin with the kind of devotion that comes from knowing exactly how quickly the people you love can be taken from you. He posts tributes to those he has lost, keeping their names alive in a world that moves on very fast and forgets very easily. His recent films earn almost nothing at the box office. The industry that once paid $20 million for his name has moved to younger faces with fresher stories, the way Hollywood always does, the way it always will. But here is the thing about John Travolta that the box office numbers and the career retrospectives and the celebrity profiles tend to miss entirely. The man has faced things that would have ended most people, not slowed them down, ended them. He has stood beside 3 deathbeds and held 3 hands as the people he loved most took their final breaths. He has watched his career die and been buried by an industry that once could not say his name loudly enough, only to claw his way back through a combination of talent and stubbornness and the refusal to accept that the story was over. He has raised a child through disability and loss and grief and fear and come out the other side still standing, still present, still trying. Applause fades, he once said. Trophies gather dust. But the people you love, the moments you shared, those endure beyond everything else. John Travolta's life spans from a tire shop in New Jersey to the peak of Hollywood and back down again. From holding a dying lover at 23 to burying a son, and then a wife in the decades that followed. From disco king to forgotten man to legend to whatever he is now, which is something harder to name, but more real than any of those labels ever were. His life is not a comeback story. It is not a tragedy. It is not a cautionary tale. It is something rarer and more complicated than any of those. It is the story of a man who kept choosing to continue, even when continuing cost everything. And maybe that is the only story worth telling.